welcome to a special Halloween episode of Vermont Film Essentials. I'm Lincoln L. Hayes.
I'm David Metzger.
And we have some of our favorite guests here with us to talk about some of our favorite horror films. Joining us are Rachel Riendeau and Devon Ewalt. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Sunday as we're recording. I got into horror movies pretty young, actually, thanks to my siblings. We only had one video rental place in town, and it was weirdly inside the Radio Shack. So we would go to Radio Shack and rent movies. And I would inevitably see the second or the third or whatever in a series just because that's what they had on the shelf. And then it wasn't really until college that I kind of was like, okay, I really like horror movies. I want to watch them. I want to digest them. What's your guys' background with horror movies?
Pretty much the same. I've been watching horror movies since I was a kid. I'm trying to think of like the first one. I saw like The Shining pretty early on. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And it was always my dad would let us watch them and my mom would get mad because we watched it, the original miniseries, when we were younger. My brother had nightmares about clowns for a really long time. My mom was really mad my dad let us watch it. But since I was younger, so I've loved it for a really long time.
I remember seeing Nightmare on Elm Street. That was the first horror movie I saw, but then that really terrified me. But at the same time, like Freddy, as I watched like the sequels and stuff, Freddy, had so many punchlines and jokes that it became this sort of like send-up of itself, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
But then I was really into like Critters, Ghoulies, all those movies. I don't know why. I just loved the creatures and just how cheesy they were. So I had kind of an affinity for cheesy horror movies as well. Yeah.
So I've told this story before, but when I was a kid, I made the declaration that I don't like horror movies. And
I'm Ted. I don't like horror.
I'm saying this to the world, but it's weird. Like I loved monster movies as a kid, and I never made that correlation that those are horror movies or those are like part of the horror genre. And when I went to college, I made that declaration to a film professor who was just like, well, we're going to change that immediately because you're not watching the right ones. And I realized that it was just because I'm not really a big fan of like slasher movies, like the gore and the blood and all that stuff. Like that stuff doesn't appeal to me and doesn't really scare me. But films like The Shining or Rosemary's Baby or The Innocents, like really slow, involving psychological thrillers. And now it's just like, it's one of my favorite genres to think of because you can tell almost any story within them and you can put so much style into it. And there's nothing like snuggling up on the couch and watching a good horror movie. Especially.
Amen to that, brother. Well, let's just jump right into our first topic. John Carpenter creates The Babysitter Killers, which is then named Halloween because up until that point, there wasn't a horror movie set at Halloween, which is just mind-boggling to think about. Granted, this is the 70s and, all of the 80s hadn't happened yet, and here he comes with this very simple story about a guy who murders babysitters, which then sets the tone and sets the rules for slasher movies thereafter. Of like, if you have sex, you're doomed. If you say, I'll be right back, you're doomed. All the stuff that later in the Scream movies is references like these are the benchmarks of horror films. I don't remember the first time I saw Halloween. I think it might have been college. Because like I said, I saw all the other Halloweens before I saw the original. And because of the sequels, I had a bad taste in my mouth about the Halloween movies. I was like, these are terrible. These are stupid schlock. What is this garbage? And then you watch the first one and you're like, this is a masterpiece. This movie, there's a reason that this spawned so many sequels because you have an amazing female lead in Jamie Lee Curtis and you have a fantastic villain who later turns into, absurd, stupid nonsense. But the original Michael Myers is terrifying. It's just a guy who doesn't ever say anything, who just won't stop. He's just coming after you. What was your guys' experience with Halloween?
I remember very clearly in high school, and it was probably 8th grade into freshman year of high school, for some reason, Halloween was like this hard to get VHS.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And like, no, you couldn't get it anywhere. And then we just got it and we watched it. And as a film student or someone that wanted to go to film school, what attracted me right away was that they made it for no money. And they made it themselves, and John Carpenter had this vision. And he's the first to say, like, all these rules and everything and all this stuff that's been created because of Halloween was never on his mind. It's like, I never made this story thinking that, you know, the person that doesn't have sex is the one that lives, and it was a rule that we lived by.
Yeah.
But I loved the fact that every shot, you know, he does that whole opening where it's Michael Myers' point of view. And then for the whole movie, every shot feels like you're peeping in on somebody, or you're watching somebody's point of view. And then he has these shots where he's like in the background. And the first time you see it, you miss it. And then the next time you watch, you're like, oh my God, it's right there.
And it teaches you how to watch horror movies from that point on, because you have a shot and Laurie's sitting there on the couch and you have all this negative space in the back. And then because of that movie, you learn to watch that negative space. You're like, he's going to come out of that shadow. He's going to come out of something. And it's never like, at least in these, in the original, the first two, it's never it's a slow reveal where you're right. If you didn't see it the first time, you miss it. And it's so effective.
It's so scary.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, he sort of took a page out of Tobe Hooper's book of being involved in the musical, the musical part of the film as well. And I mean, that theme music is so iconic. It's been sampled by Dr. Dre and made a beat. I mean, it's literally so incorporated into our pop culture. It's like the Sergio Leone Wild West theme. It's that iconic. And it really kind of set the tone for his film career. And it really was so crucial to the film, that unsettling feeling of being in that neighborhood with that music playing. You know?
And that music, it's so effective because it's unsettling, and it just feels like at any time something is going to happen. So when that music plays, you're like, where is he? Like, and I saw it, I think, probably around the same, I think like 7th or 8th grade. And I loved it because it was so scary, because I love slasher movies. And I loved Halloween because I think the scariest part of it is that he never runs. He has like the same speed all the time, and he keeps getting up. And that is terrifying if you like put yourself in that situation of like you're in the house and you're like, okay, like I hit him with this thing and he just gets back up and he just keeps coming. He doesn't stop. So it's like, well, where do you go? You run upstairs, you run outside, and he's just following you like at the same speed the whole time. But somehow he keeps catching up to you, even though like you're running as fast as you can. That's the scariest part. I love that he never runs. And I mean, Friday the 13th is a little similar too. Like when it's that slow moving that like they know they're gonna get you, and it's so scary, and I love it.
I didn't think how that might have been some sort of source material for the Terminator as well. You mentioned Night of the Hunter last time, but it's like definitely. I didn't think about Michael Myers, how he just keeps getting up and doesn't need to run, and you know.
Oh, that's
and he's gonna get you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a matter of time.
And he never explains that, you know, whatever metaphysical, imaginary place where, like, who is Michael Myers, like this entity.
Right.
And that's as I watch it more and more, you know, the scene when he's with the sheriff and they're inside the house and Loomis is going to be, you know, he's just there waiting for him to come back.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how when he was his doctor, like he just looked into his eyes and he just saw like nothing, and it was just pure evil. And a scene like that is scarier than anything that's in the movie. And just like with Quint telling the Indianapolis story in Jaws, it's like, you know, what you don't see is way more effective. And the body count is very low in the movie.
It is,
And there's no blood.
For like a slasher.
So it's just like we were talking about last time, you know, as they get more and more into the sequels, they take the wrong things and pump that up.
Right.
And don't have any of the things that make it as effective as it is.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. You watch the original and then watch what did we watch the other day? Resurrection.
Oh God.
Busta Rhymes.
Totally.
And it's a totally different movie. Like, yes, they can still call it Halloween because it's Michael Myers, but like it's a totally different feel. It's more campy, definitely more gore. Like, but the beauty of Halloween is, and John Carpenter films, is that like that's not what he goes for.
Right.
And like he really wants to scare you.
Yeah.
And that's why I love him.
The only thing, like looking back on it, every time I watch it, I hate it because so the opening sequence is very effective.
Yeah.
So he comes down and the parents take the mask off. And every time I'm like, why do the parents just stand there? Like,
Yeah,
it would be so
that's a good
awesome
point.
if, like, if they walk into the house and like one of them discovers
Right.
his sister
Right.
and it just screams, and he's just standing there like still, and you hear the scream. It would have been so much better if only I had. No. But
Dear
moving
John
on.
Carpenter.
So he does Halloween. He creates the slasher film. I think The Thing is a good masterpiece.
Yes.
Yeah. Agreed.
One of my top 10 films.
And it's a monster movie. It's
Yep.
an alien movie, but it's also a really good 70s paranoia thriller.
Yeah.
And the scariest scenes in that movie for me is not what happens like when they're doing the blood test and they do the blood and there's the stuff that comes
Yeah.
out, but them actually doing the blood test and everything before that.
Yeah.
When they're drawing the blood and it's just like, oh my God, like,
What's gonna happen?
yeah, it's so effective.
You're waiting. You're waiting. You're waiting for the monster. You're looking in the shadows. You're trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, when I was a kid, like, I would see that movie on TV, and it was bad because all the good stuff was.
Yeah. I don't think I saw it like the full movie for a while.
College, at least.
Yeah.
First year of college, and I remember the scene when it's one of the first guys that gets it, and his hand is changed.
Oh, yeah,
and he
yeah.
runs out, and then they all surround him, and he looks up at them, and he like lets out this scream, and I remember being like, I'm scared shitless right now.
Yeah.
This is so good. Like I can't. This was not what I watched when I watched it on TV.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's when I was just like, oh, this movie is
Masterpiece.
like,
Yeah.
and it stinks that it was so trashed upon its release.
Well, it was up against stuff like E.T., I think, that
Yeah.
year. We should, first and foremost, I forgot to say this at the top, we're lovers, not experts. So anything that we don't get right, whatever.
You can
We're
have a
trying.
corrections corner.
Yeah. I'm doing what I can with the laptop here.
You know, Carpenter is similar to Romero in that he could make a film have so many layers and weave social commentary into
Absolutely.
into a
Yeah.
horror film without making it overt, where you're just like, oh wait, this is about way more than just the essential plot points.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think with horror films that are done right, it's so much better when, you know, everyone wants a happy ending. But it's like the only genre where it's just like it's necessary to have that type of nihilistic ending. And he
Yes.
does it with both films, like at the end of Halloween when he shoots him, he falls off, and then he walks over and nothing's there.
Yeah.
And then you hear that music, and then it just goes through that montage of all the places that he's been, and you hear the breathing, you're like, you're like, oh my God. And so too, at the end of The Thing,
Yeah.
when they're just sitting there and you're just, let's just wait and see what happens.
That's so good.
And you never know. Then
Right.
there are so many theories around that film. Friends of mine on the Pharaohs Project podcast covered The Thing, and they like went through all of the little theories and stuff, like the brown coat theory, and like all this other stuff. And that last scene, I can't remember if it's Keith David or Kurt Russell. One of them's breathing, but you can't see their breath, even though they're out in the snow. So it's like, okay, well he must be the Thing then, because his breath isn't steaming up, and it's just The Thing and Halloween both are films that I love to revisit. We are going to watch Halloween this year, obviously. I got it on
Always do.
Blu-ray for that purpose, so that we can rewatch it. And I just love going back to these movies, just like Jaws. Any of these classic, started the genre movies, where you can just go, man, this is how you make a movie. This is how you make a solid horror film. I love it to death.
Yeah.
I got John Carpenter's filmography here, and I'm really surprised to see he has 32 directing credits and 30 composer credits.
Yeah.
So
he kind of always did his own scores.
Yeah,
He
he
did
always
his
did
own
his own
scores
scores.
for everything,
Yep.
and still continues to.
And he's one of those directors who I just like. He's underappreciated only because, and it's hard. And he's one of those directors that started out so great. Like Assault on Precinct 13 is great. Escape
Yes.
from New York is great.
Yeah, they're so good.
I even enjoyed Escape from LA because it became like
Yeah.
he became like more like involved in stylized films.
Totally.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
But his remake of Village of the Damned, while not being a great film, there's some great stuff in it. Like you
Yeah.
watch it and you're like, oh, you're still there.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
did
it's
a
just
John
hard.
Carpenter episode on my podcast a few years ago, and you really can see kind of a decline in the quality of his films, but then at the same time, he's also getting a lot of pushback from Hollywood, especially in the 90s and stuff, where it seems like he's kind of losing it a little bit, but at the same time, he's very vocal about how everybody's trying to get him. And they're like, well, every time I try to make a movie, everybody's trying to take a piece of it and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the guy, he started so strong and he made such great films. And then after that, he's still trying. He's still working. I mean, his last, he has director credits as of this year still. So he's still active. And he is one of the producers of the reboot of Halloween that's going to be out next year.
Yes.
Which I have very mixed feelings about that.
Another reboot.
Jamie Lee Curtis is in it, so I feel good about it.
Jamie Lee Curtis is in it, but so is Busta Rhymes. Why would you bring his character back?
Because I think those movies found a different audience in that they're fun and silly, and Busta Rhymes is so terrible in it. No offense, Busta Rhymes. But you're awful.
Offense, Busta Rhymes.
I love
You
Busta
suck
Rhymes,
in that
but
movie.
please stop being an actor. But like, it found this whole other audience that loves. I love them. I love those bad, terrible Halloween sequels. They are so stupid. Same with Friday the 13th and Nightmare. Like, I love all of the terrible sequels for very different reasons because they're fun to laugh at and they're silly. And it found this other audience. So the fact that they know it's like a cult thing. The fact that they know that Busta Rhymes is this hated character that everyone loves to hate, that he's so bad and it's so stupid, and he like karate chops him in that one movie, and like they have to include him. Of course they have to include him because we won't come see it because it's stupid.
Right.
Like that's,
I mean,
you know.
Busta Rhymes is almost like such a pop culture kind of person that it's almost like you're just having Busta Rhymes in your film to have Busta Rhymes
Yeah,
be
yeah.
the entity that he is.
Right,
Because he is
exactly.
such a kind of
Totally.
dynamic,
We can
kind
put
of
his name on the
weirdo.
poster.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
David Gordon Green will be directing that.
Wow.
And
He is such an anomaly, man. I
Whoa.
cannot figure
Yeah.
that guy out.
Because he
Pineapple
starts out with
Express.
He
these
starts
art
out,
films.
yes,
I'm
like
so
indie,
confused.
kind of like Terrence Malick-esque.
Yeah.
And then is just like stoner comedy.
Yeah.
And then rediscovers that a little bit with the Nicolas Cage film Joe, but then goes back. He's really interesting.
He directed 6 episodes of Vice Principals for
Right.
HBO.
Right, because he did like
Because
yeah,
he does
like
all
the,
those
the little
Danny
stoner
McBride
comedy.
movies.
Yeah.
Your Highness. I
Pineapple
mean, The
Express.
Sitter.
Yeah.
Eastbound and Down.
Yeah.
Like, he is all over the map.
Yep.
So you know that this film
Interesting.
I know.
is probably going to be self-aware.
Should be funny.
John Carpenter has said in an interview that it exists in an alternate reality, and from what I've heard, it's going to basically disregard either the last film or the last couple films, and just kind of be like, and we're at this place. And all it says for the description is Laurie Strode comes to her final confrontation with Michael Myers, the masked figure who has haunted her since she narrowly escaped his killing spree on Halloween night 4 decades ago. And as of right now, the only other actor attached is Judy Greer, playing Karen Strode. So probably her daughter or sister or
Weird
something.
daughter, yeah.
Did you guys like the Rob Zombie remake? Or did
It was on
Oh, okay.
in the
I have
background.
seen it.
I haven't actually watched the film.
Did. I did. It definitely had a totally different feel.
Well, he's
I don't mind Rob Zombie's films.
he's clearly a Tobe Hooper disciple.
Yes,
like it's like
for
without
sure, yeah.
question. It's
I mean,
but I liked it.
He's very much more a Leatherface than
yes,
a Michael Myers
yes.
in that film.
I think he
Right.
wanted to see if you could take Leatherface's
Right.
sort of like, character trope and like install it into that
Yeah,
trope.
yeah. Yeah, no, I liked it. It definitely didn't hold a candle to the original, but I liked it.
So then why does he make a sequel? I guess because it made money. But
He took a different take. I think he just likes to just do his own thing with them, kind of put his own stamp on it.
yeah, that's true.
I mean, why not?
I mean, you get Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Loomis. That's a good
he
get.
was good.
I mean,
He was a good choice.
Even in the lesser Halloween movies, the ones that Donald Pleasance is still in, he's still being Donald Pleasance. He's still owning that role and being so,
no matter how
so
badly
great.
written it is, he can elevate bad dialogue.
Yes, he really
And
can.
he's able to continue the story and keep a through line thread, because there's, I can't remember if it's 2 or 4 when he gets burned. So then the latter films, he has got the burns on his face. And then he's continuing the lore and continuing all of this stuff. And it's not until they start introducing all this stupid supernatural stuff and the cult and all that other nonsense from like 5 on. And you're like, what's happening? And then even Season of the Witch, which isn't even Michael Myers, they were just trying to take the franchise in another direction, is a pretty solid horror movie. It's a pretty good Halloween film. But everybody's like, oh, it doesn't have Michael Myers in it, I don't care. Like, all right. I mean, the biggest hindrance of that film is the fact that it's called Halloween 3. Because if they had just called it Season of the Witch, or, Masked Halloween Killers or something like that, it probably would have done better. But since it doesn't have Michael Myers in it, everybody's like, boo, no, not going for it. You've already mentioned 2 of our next filmmakers that we're going to discuss. Tobe Hopper, George Romero, and Wes Craven, all of whom passed away recently, but definitely put their mark on the horror genre. Devon just this morning told us he watched Texas Chainsaw.
That's right. It's my favorite horror movie.
It's
the
first time I watched that was in college as well. We decided to have a bunch of people over and watch horror movies, and we ended up watching Texas Chainsaw, I think Evil Dead, and Dawn of the Dead. And having not seen them, none of us knew anything about them, and we ended up just kind of doing Mystery Science Theater and making fun of them throughout. And one of the worst jokes that I remember is the character Franklin, who's in a wheelchair. We dubbed him FDR for the run of the movie because we're horrible. But that is another great film that launched a whole bunch of mediocre sequels to follow, but has a very low body count. There's little to no blood in it, and it's all psychological. It's all situational, constantly looking into the shadows to see if there's something there.
Yeah.
To me, it's the first slasher film because
It is.
if you notice, there's one there when I think it's, I love how the characters are the hitchhiker, the old man, like in capital letters almost, like, so like the hitchhiker, aka that's the weird crazy son guy. He takes Sally's finger, and in the moment that he slashes it, you hear that thing that eventually became a cliche, the the violin, one note as he slashed it. I mean, come on, that is like to me like the first slasher moment, if
It's
there
credited as
was
that.
one before. Is it?
I'm pretty
See, I didn't
sure
know that.
that's like the
'Cause
official first
that jumped out at
slasher
me.
movie.
So it's not necessarily like the whole movie, but in that one moment, it almost birthed like that moment in other films of like the timing, Although, I mean, I guess like Hitchcock kind of did that with Psycho too.
Hitchcock had his thing,
as
for
far
sure.
as like the music, so it was almost like an homage.
Right.
That music is almost an homage to Psycho.
Well, they were all such descendants of Hitchcock with Psycho, and then even Peeping Tom.
Yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah.
And with Texas, for me, the first time I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's like the matter-of-factness of it all was really surprising to me. And like when Leatherface grabs the girl for the first time and then just puts him on the hook, like it's just out of nowhere he comes out, does it, and
Right.
then it's just quick, and
Right.
then like she's screaming and then boom,
Right.
Yep.
and then it's just dead silence,
Right.
and you're just like,
Well, he kills the other guy before that, though. Like, because it's like I feel like the way that led up, the way they built towards that moment to me was because he wanders into the house and then sees that room.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, I think the matter of factness of the sledgehammer to the head was the matter-of-factness of hitting a cow with a sledgehammer.
Right,
There was
right.
a lot being said there. Is our discomfort with if someone tells us. Notice, like in the van, he's like telling them about it,
Yeah.
slaughtering, and they're like, "I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it." Oh, but you want to eat the food.
Right.
So it's
Right.
like this sort of matter-of-factness of like, yeah, of course these people would like if that became commonplace would be like, I wonder
Yeah.
if I want to do this to a human, like you know. And then it's like it's just and then the shutting of the door, man, is like such like a statement, you know.
Yeah, and that's why that movie again is so scary, because it is like Michael Myers, where it's just he just keeps going, and like it keeps going, like keeps happening. Like there's no like the sledgehammer stuff and like putting her on the hook. There's no like really like a lot of like build up and torture like to it. It's just like that's happening.
Right.
So it's scary that it's like, oh my God, you had no time to even get away or even think about it or defend yourself.
Right.
And that's why their Leatherface and all the other characters are so scary, that they're like, they're just going to do it. They're going to
there's
get
no
you,
real
and they're going to.
premeditation to it. It's
there's
just
no
like
premeditation. Also,
instinct.
and there's nowhere to go. Like that's the other thing too, is they can't get away, and it's so terrifying, because it's like, what would you do?
Right. Because you want to think that I'll have time to like react and do something. It's like, no, you're just boom, done.
Right. And then you're dead, and that's why it's scary. That's, oh my God, like they are really screwed, guys. Like this is bad.
I feel like as beautiful as Daniel Pearl's cinematography is in the film, because that was just like a constant thing of like being wowed by the camera movement.
compositions.
It's incredible. But it's almost like even with all that artistry going on, Tobe Hooper wanted to depict this thing very realistically.
Yes.
He wanted you, like you said, is this sort of like feeling of like this is just unfolding before you. It's not done in any way to heighten suspense.
No.
It just is what it is, and
Yeah.
it's scary because you feel like you're watching it. You know?
Yeah, like you're just like looking through a window at
Right.
everything that's happening, and you want to be able to stop it or be able to help it, but it just keeps happening, and that it's so good.
It's narrated by John Carpenter.
That's right.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I love
It's
when
like-
I found
it's
that
like a
out, because I grew up on Night
Right.
Court, so that was.
But yeah, no, that's also why the way it's filmed and structured is very unique. It's very different, and I think I think it's credited as the first slasher from what my
74.
What I just
experience.
read was,
or is it Last House on the Left?
Black Christmas.
Oh, Black Christmas.
So was that
I always
70?
forget about
Was
Black
that like
Christmas.
70? This was 74 too, though. I wonder if it was released.
Black Christmas also has one of the first Final Girls.
I wonder if it's just a matter of months that it came out before.
I always forget about Black Christmas.
I mean, that's clearly a slasher film.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
It's not even like.
So yeah, they came out around that same time. Yeah, it's such a good film.
And then, what do we got? Like 8 years later, he directs a good portion of Poltergeist,
Right.
which is in our stack of movies to watch this year.
One of my
too.
favorite movies of all time.
And just that movie has so many layers to it, and it's oh no, huh? It looked good for a minute.
it actually kind of fell in a lovely way.
Oh look, the spider's still
It
visible.
was a ghost.
The ghost in the studio.
Okay.
A perfect melding of Spielberg and Hooper,
Yeah.
which there's the debate of how much did Tobe Hooper actually direct, how much did Spielberg
It's like
direct.
AI with Spielberg and Kubrick almost,
Right.
where you're like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, how much is who and how? Yeah.
Or the original The Thing from Another World, how it's produced by Howard Hawks and Christian Nyby is the director. But there's people that's like, it's got
Right,
Hawks's vibe
right.
all about this.
Gone with the Wind too had multiple directors.
Oh, yeah,
You just
we talked
wonder,
about
You just
that.
wonder who.
Oh
who
yeah,
did
good old
what.
Victor Fleming
Exactly.
directing Gone
Wizard
with
of
the
Oz
Wind and Wizard of
Gone with the
Oz
Wind.
in the same year.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever
See?
you feel
Whenever
like
we're on a movie
life's
set,
getting you down,
it's-
don't
At least
worry,
we're not
guys.
Victor Fleming.
We're not Victor Fleming. What is it about Poltergeist that is so scary even to this day?
All of it.
The tree.
The,
The
tree!
tree.
The clown!
The Indian burial ground, which then becomes its own, cliche trope.
Well, it had built-in mythology.
Please raise your
you know
hand,
what I mean?
honey.
And that's where I think like the whole debate about Hooper or Spielberg, because I don't know where you are with this, but it's like
He's right there.
There's no doubt in my mind that Tobe Hooper directed that movie, but Spielberg, just being that he, I think he had a hand in writing the screenplay.
Yeah.
It's like he has his Spielberg stamp over it. Like the whole thing about the lightning storm, that's totally Spielberg in the way that he creates
Storytelling,
suspense and tells a story. But, you know, when he walks into the bathroom and he's peeling his face off, it's like, there's Tobe Hopper.
Right.
Although
me,
that's actually Spielberg with the hands.
with the hands.
So
yeah, it is.
he's everywhere. And you almost want a producer that is that hands-on.
Yeah.
I mean, will we ever really know? Probably not until Spielberg tells us. But even then, it's going to be his word versus hers and blah, blah, blah. And I've heard different actors on podcasts talking about working on that film. And then, of course, there's The Curse, which haunted that film as well, of people dying horribly and suddenly. But you know that he was brought in for a reason. Like, otherwise, Spielberg would have just done it himself. And this is, what did I say? This is 82, so he's working on E.T. At the same time.
Right.
So he's like, well, I'm going to focus on E.T., but I'm also going to have a hand in this other film.
Which I don't think is a bad thing, though.
No.
You know,
No,
that
not at
he
all.
was maybe had to be that minimal in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, the reason, one of the, why it's so scary is that you think it's over and that it's not.
Right. It has such a false ending.
Which is my
Oh,
favorite
that
part. I
fake
mean,
out.
I love that movie so much. But that's probably my favorite part of it is that, like, you think it's over and you're like, all right, we got Carolina
We're all
back.
safe.
Like, we're all safe. Everything's great. And then it, like, jumps to an 11. Like, oh, my God, when she, like, takes the bath and then goes into her bedroom and, like, it pulls her along the ceiling and the closet opens up. Like it's so great that it's just awesome. It's just this undefeatable evil that they think that they've bested, and it's like, nope, you have not. It's still terrible. We're gonna suck your house down.
And it has so many smart filmmaking techniques in it. The chairs on the table bit. You told me that it was, or was it you who told me it was a whole set piece?
Not me.
No?
It was Matt.
Our friend Matt told us that.
It's a whole set piece.
So
it's
in that,
one take.
in
It
that
is one
shot,
take.
when
great.
she puts Carol Ann up on the counter and then you
one
come
of my
back
favorite shots.
and the chairs are all stacked up,
It's so
that
good.
was one solid piece that they could move in and move out, move in and move out. Genius.
Yeah.
And not something that I would ever think about. I'm like, how the
No.
hell are we going to do this?
But that's why that movie's also great, is that, and it's a bit of, it's that mix of, I think Spielberg likes to do that a lot too with practical
Absolutely.
props and sets and special effects, because those end up being more believable, more powerful. They're a little bit more scary because you watch it, like, that scene is so great that she turns and then turns back and it's like that, and it's like, what would you do? Like, oh my God, what would you do? And it's, practical. I think they put her in a room that spins.
Yes.
Jo Beth Williams, when, like, she's on the ceiling. And there's a couple other, like, really just great practical effects that, because they don't look fake, it looks so real and so scary. And I like it because it's like, like monster alien kind of haunted house. I'm also a big fan of haunted house movies. I love haunted house movies, especially like that it's like, oh, it's just a ghost, it's fine. And it's like, no, these ghosts mean business.
Yeah.
They are mad.
This ghost means business.
There's also something to be said about the way Spielberg takes the everyday, ordinary suburban household that, most of us, when we're watching, there's something that we grew up with that reminds us, like the bed, and everyone has that tree that just looks
Oh, yeah.
spooky.
Terrifying.
That tree. And the pool.
And he puts in those moments that make you feel like these characters, like when Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams are smoking pot in their bedroom,
Yeah.
and then they're joking around, and he does the belly thing.
Yeah.
It's just like these people,
Yeah.
Right.
and you grew up with these people, and that's what makes it that much more effective and terrifying when the stuff starts to
Right.
hit the fan.
And
And we're all
that's-
about that age, too.
Yeah.
That those were our parents. So we watch it and we see Craig D. Nelson, we're like, well, there's my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's my mom, and that's what they do. And you, as an adult, you're like, oh, I hope that they smoked pot so they would chill the hell out once in a while.
But that's the why I also love horror movies, is that a lot of times, and especially like the greats like Carpenter and Hooper and Craven and Spielberg, like, they add such a human quality to it that you do know those people, or you recognize something in yourself, or it's just these normal people living their everyday with their kids, and their teenage daughter is like a brat, and then like their little girl's adorable, and like whatever. And that you know those people. They're human. Same with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know those guys. Like those are like people that you'd be friends with. Like you'd be hanging out.
Well, and the
with them.
dialogue matters too. The interchange between the characters, it helps build a trust of the characters, and like you say, like you can like feel like you can relate to them.
Exactly.
Which makes it even more terrifying when horrible things happen to
You're
them.
like, oh no, not my friends.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I don't know them.
Or it's like, and I mean, I could be babysitting a kid and have a killer come after me. Like that's Halloween's like that too.
But
they're all
you'd be
very
okay.
human.
You'd be
obviously.
fine.
Please.
She's got this.
Do you mind if I loop back to Texas Chainsaw real quick?
How dare you,
Never.
sir?
So, permission to leave the poltergeist room.
This room is clear.
So, like, I feel like Tobe Hopper was the way he started the film by having the news reports being read about all these, not just the bodies being found and the graves being robbed, but talking about an oil refinery fire. I mean, think about what we're dealing with today, the wildfires. About a suicide unrelated to these grisly killings, and it's like just reminding us that things happen every day, and that this is one. I don't know. It's just really interesting to kind of subtly interweave these natural things with the unnatural, or not supernatural in this case, but the evil that's involved.
It's
right.
He's creating a plausible Texas in the summertime, 120 degrees or however hot it was when they made this movie, so that you can't be like, oh, well, this doesn't exist in my reality.
Exactly. Right.
Like, oh, I remember that. I remember when these things happened. I remember when that was going on.
It was probably terrifying for Texans to watch that film.
Yeah, because
especially at that time. I mean, it was 1 year removed from when the thing happened. Like, he must have felt compelled to make that film. Like, I have to tell this story because this is just,
Oh,
and that's why, like, I think the ingredient of a perfect horror film is when you can take whatever the horror is, whether it's a haunted house, whether it's ghosts or a monster or some crazy guy, when you link it to something that is actually happening, so that the horror that's manifesting is something out of a real horror.
Right.
Like we were talking about Godzilla, and it's like, it took a while before I realized, like, oh, this is Hiroshima.
Yeah.
Even something like The Thing, it's like, no, this is because of Watergate. Night of the Living Dead.
Absolutely.
Perfect segue,
just
David.
to segue into George A. Romero was the first time where it's like, oh, we're watching zombies, and Roger Ebert, who we love, has an awesome review about it, and it's like all of a sudden you're watching it and you think, oh, this isn't just a zombie movie. Like, this is touching on something very, very uncomfortable.
There's a lot of
and
social
then the
commentary
ending happens,
happening
and you're
here.
like, we're the zombies. It's like the
Yep.
first time that he linked, like, okay, I'm going to tell a zombie movie. Guillermo del Toro has this awesome quote where he's like, a movie is 10% the tale and 90% the telling of the tale. So it's like, I'm going to tell a zombie movie. Okay, I'm going to tell a zombie movie, and I'm going to base it on civil rights. Oh, all right, I want to watch that movie. Or like, I'm going to tell a vampire movie. Great. I'm going to tell a vampire movie in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Sign me
And
up.
that's what George Romero did, is just like, he tapped into the culture of the time, and found a way to make a horror movie that perfectly married with it, and made the audience drop their guard because, oh, I'm just watching stupid zombies walking around going like this. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, crap.
Exactly.
This is real life.
Oh, no.
And Dawn of the Dead with consumerism. I mean,
Yeah.
he's very interesting in how he places these movies and what he kind of leaves it up to us to make our different conclusions, but he puts it all out there. He doesn't force anything down your throat. He's very clever.
No. He uses it as a clever tool.
Right.
Yeah, he's not forcing it. You can still enjoy it, but I think it seeps in a little deeper the way he uses it, because you like go all in with horror movies or zombie movies. You're in it. You're scared. You're rooting for a character or something, and then when, you know, a hidden meaning is presented, I feel like you feel it a little deeper because you've been involved in this story. And you're like, oh my God, yeah, that is it. Oh, I am a monster.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And that, like, Psycho, Peeping Tom, Psycho, and Night of the Living Dead is probably like a good drawing of the line, because horror films before then were more about, it's like Victorian England and you know,
Yeah.
Gothic.
They were
and
like
mythical.
drawing room horror
right.
films.
Yes, yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Something that you can't connect to as a modern audience. You're like, all right, well, let's watch this.
Right.
Right.
Like you're responding to something. You're responding to something else. It's like, oh, here's a mythical, like, faraway place
Right.
where the horror isn't affecting me and isn't in my backyard.
Yeah.
And that all of a sudden these films came out and was like, nope, the horror is right here.
Literally in your backyard.
Well, because people
at night.
needed escape when those films were being made
Yeah.
too, like
Right,
surrounding
right.
the Great Depression, like years
Yeah.
after when Dracula came out. It's like people didn't need to be reminded of the horrors they were
Yeah.
facing. Whereas I think George Romero was like, people need to be reminded of the horrors we're
Right,
facing.
like let's find something that really
There
will
needs
scare
there's
them. You
bad
know?
stuff
like,
going on right now in 1968 in regards to race relations. I'm going to make a film about that. And
Right.
I just had the thought that in his Dead movies, you could very easily replace the zombies with a natural disaster. Think about Dawn of the Dead if the zombies were a wildfire. And all these people are forced into the mall. And then the fire keeps coming in a little bit and they fight it back.
I mean,
It
that
keeps
would be
coming
an
in a little bit and
incredible
fighting it
film.
back.
I would see that film today, if that just because of what's going on today.
Yeah.
The fact that it's still relevant,
Yeah.
that you could still it could be chaos
Yeah.
with the ingredients of reality right
Right.
now. Like,
And then one of the best remakes, in my opinion, is James Gunn's Dawn of the Dead.
it's awesome.
It's very good.
And I remember
it's
when that
really,
came
really
out.
good.
I'm in college, and you know it pops up on whatever, I think it was like on MSN or something, that Dawn of the Dead was in theaters, and I was like, oh, they re-released the movie? That's neat. I was, oh wait, it's a reboot. Oh, it's a remake. Oh, okay. What is this? And you know, my friend Kyle and I were very much purists at the time. We're like, how dare they remake this movie? It is a classic. Dawn of the Dead is blah, blah. And then you see it and you're like, this is a pretty good movie.
It's very
you know,
good.
This
I really
is a
enjoy it a
solid
lot.
film. Like, James Gunn is a great filmmaker in that he understood what that movie was about. It wasn't just about the zombies. Yes, he put zombies in it, and those zombies are great, and they're effective, and they're scary,
But it's a human story.
but it's a human story.
You know, another great remake is The Crazies. But
I didn't see the remake.
The original film is truly terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite Romero films. There's that moment when the guys in the hazmat suits are going past the grandmother in the rocking chair.
Yeah.
And you're just not, you trust the just generic narrative imagery of a grandmother in a rocking chair.
Right.
You implicitly trust her
Yep.
based on who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And when that knitting needle rises, it's like truly terrifying.
Yeah.
It brings me back to it. I think it has to be inspired by Perkins, coming in to that
yeah.
shot as the mom. It's like you're not expecting it, and it's just so terrifying.
Yeah.
So scary.
It taps into your deepest fears and insecurities of like, I'm safe with grandma. I have to be.
Yeah.
But what happens if grandma goes crazy? Then what do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a brilliant move for a director to play off our feelings of comfort and
Yeah.
safety, to use images that they know will
Well, yeah,
make us feel
instill
safe.
comfort.
you
And it's
know?
like, oh, that's fine. That won't happen.
Grandma won't hurt us. Well, she's crazy. She's crazy, Grandma. She's not.
It's
Yeah.
not a normal grandma.
Sadly, Romero's later films weren't nearly the quality of Night or Dawn or Crazies or any of those. Even Day of the Dead
I've never seen it.
is fine, but it's just, I don't think he had a strong enough point of view in that one about what the actual message was. So it just kind of gets messy, and like Bub is the like main zombie, and he can learn to talk, and like he's becoming cognizant. It's like a transition of they're going to be the new dominant species on Earth because mankind has had its turn and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And then Land of the Dead is not great. Diary of the Dead was nigh unwatchable, and I didn't bother watching.
And he still directed all those films.
He
I
did.
just
Yeah.
remember when they I worked at Blockbuster when they came out, and I'd be like, "This just looks horrible." Wait,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
directed it? Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
I
like-
was surprised that he was. I was like, oh, they're just making sequels,
Right.
and I was like, oh no, Romero, why?
Yeah.
No, he's still in it.
And what's
I mean,
sad
he
about-
did EP the Crazies remake, so he was involved
Oh,
still
okay.
with that
Right.
one,
Okay.
which is good.
Right.
But man, the dude smoked every day. He's just a chain smoking with those giant glasses, and like
love him.
he just, you see him, and you go, yeah, I want to hang out with that guy. I want to hear him tell stories, and it's tragic that we lost him. But you can't smoke that much and expect to get anywhere in your life.
It's tragic about Romero because with the whole public domain thing
Oh, yeah.
with Night of the Living Dead, and then just the way Hollywood just took that and just, it's like he basically created the zombie film.
Yeah, yeah.
But then
He's
they
the
just took
father
it
of
and
modern
ran with
zombies.
it.
Right.
And like Walking Dead, like one of the reasons why I stopped watching The Walking Dead is because it's not about making a zombie movie or saying some critique about humanity. It truly is just about what can we get away with showing on network TV.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we stopped too.
Us too. Yeah.
The first couple seasons were, I mean, the comic is great, or I guess the graphic novel. They're great because they still have like some human commentary and stuff, and yes, they are very violent. But like the show, yeah, definitely went away from like survival and like them kind of fighting each other and
human
picking a leader.
aspect.
The human aspect. When you lose the human aspect,
Yep.
it's a completely different thing.
It's the same thing as Night of the Living Dead. We are the living dead.
Yeah, yeah.
We are the
Right.
Walking Dead.
Right.
And when your show just turns into, hey, let's brain this dude with a
Let's
baseball
brain
bat.
it's the
one of the
reason-
best our favorite character. Like, come
It's
on,
the
guys.
reason World War Z did not work for me because it
book is
just
so good, though.
started.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know
Yeah, it
anyone.
does
I didn't know
start.
Brad Pitt's story.
No.
I don't know anyone.
It
They're-
just
people are
starts.
just dying.
Have you read the book?
No.
Well,
Oh.
I will bring it to you because
Yes.
the book is
Okay,
amazing.
that's
The
what
book
I've
is
heard,
like
yeah.
is awesome and humans, and it's like a bunch of. I thought they were going to make the movie with a bunch of vignettes because the book is a bunch of vignettes.
That was the original version.
It's
was
all
going to do
these
that.
different characters.
See, that would have been
with
so interesting.
The war, with the zombie war,
Yeah.
and it's all these different characters, and it's
It's
so
almost like shortcuts, but like
Yeah.
with zombies. See that?
and it's so good. And then I watched the movie, and I was like, "What is this? Is not the movie.
No.
This is not it.
Garbage.
It's not the book at all."
Moving on to our next director in memoriam, Wes Craven. Begins his career with Last House on the Left.
I love that movie.
Horrifying movie.
Yeah.
Banned movie.
1972. He has this idea, and it's just,
God, it's
Oh.
so good.
it creates so
I'm
many
not a
great
fan.
films.
You don't
You're
like
not
it?
a fan?
I'm not a fan. It's hard for me to say it because it's so revered that I know I'm like in the minority. But it's the type of thing where I thought the remake was better.
The remake's actually pretty
Because
good.
I just
I mean,
something,
it's made-
something
it's
didn't.
made for nothing.
I could rewatch it now and maybe gain something from
Yeah.
it. But it was like 10 years ago, and I guess it was so built up to me that
Yeah.
maybe I went in
That
with
could
too
definitely-
high
And I'll be honest, the
expectations.
first time I watched it, I was like, I don't get it. But then you think about what it was able to do and what it created
Okay.
and what came from it, and then you can really be like, okay,
Got you.
that is a good
So
starting
context
point.
kind of helps.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, knowing that it's his first film,
Right.
they made it for no money,
Yeah.
and then he goes on to create such amazing things after
Right,
that. And you're
right.
like, okay, you had that seed. You knew what you wanted to do, and you knew how to make a solid, terrifying movie.
Yeah.
And it gets a little 70s, it gets a little Italian giallo
Right.
in there where it's kind of uncomfortable to watch, but
Yeah, it definitely is
it's
uncomfortable to
got
watch.
such a solid foundation that you're like, okay, this house might fall over, but it's at no fault of his.
When I realized that it was loosely based on Bergman's The Virgin Spring,
Yes,
that's when I watched it with a different context.
Okay.
it is loosely based
Gotcha.
on that. Yeah.
And it is pretty, kind of like what we're saying. It's like home invasion can happen.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. It truly is terrifying.
And what do you do?
Right.
That's,
How would you
that's,
respond?
That's
How
the
would you
best
respond?
horror
Yeah.
movie for me. It's like, here is an impossible situation. What would you do if it happened to you?
Yep.
And especially growing up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
These kind of movies where it's
Yeah.
just like, or like The Strangers or You're Next.
To me, Straw Dogs is
Straw Dogs,
the
yeah.
mother of all home invasion
Yes.
movies. Because
Talk
to me,
about a
it does
terrible
not
remake.
get, absolutely.
Yeah, not good.
It doesn't get more terrifying than that. And as far as
Mm-hmm.
the piece of what would you do, Dustin Hoffman just so brilliantly portrayed the psychological kind of path of how you would be forced to become this, and then it's actually that kind of primal nature exists in all of us.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
The iconic
exactly.
broken glasses.
Oh God.
Man. So then we get A Nightmare on Elm Street from Mr. Wes
It's a
Craven,
masterpiece.
which also then
I love
spawns
that movie so much.
a whole new
Yeah.
subgenre. of
Really
horror
fun
films.
sequels, by the way.
Yeah, very fun.
Fun,
I
but
really-
not scary.
Not
Like,
scary.
That is,
Right.
that is the Halloween movies declined in that they just got stupid.
Right.
They were kind of fun, but I feel like each one you're just like, this is frustrating. But with all of the Freddy sequels, they just get fun and silly, and they
Right.
become like midnight movies and like.
Well, they're like cartoons.
Let's just get some popcorn.
And I think
and
there
Yeah,
even was a
yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street cartoon.
There was.
You
Yeah.
know, so it's like it's just fun for the fans of the universe. I think they knew they couldn't keep up the horror aspect of it.
Right.
You
Because
know?
they made Freddy such a character.
Yeah.
You liked Freddy.
You like Freddy.
He made you laugh.
You like Freddy.
You know?
Which is also why it ends up being scary, because you
Right.
like him and you get
Right.
into
you
him, and
start
then you're like,
rooting
oh,
for
but
him.
he's
You're
still
like,
killing
how's
them.
he going
Right.
to kill these kids next? What's
Right.
what's
Well,
the next big kill?
It's
gonna
the
be?
genius of Robert Englund, because
Yeah.
Oh, he's
before
so good.
before Jim Carrey, there was Jim Varney,
Yep.
and there was Robert
Robert
Englund.
Robert Englund.
He had a way of just his delivery was just so good. I mean,
Yeah, and that's why I could talk forever about Wes Craven, but one of the reasons why I think he really got into, he doesn't forget the humor in a lot, and that's a lot of like, I mean, thinking of Scream movies, that's Kevin Williamson as well, but yeah, I think with like Freddy, like it's still, he still finds a little bit of humor in it while scaring your pants
Absolutely.
off, but
Let's talk about Scream.
Yeah.
What
how long do we have?
we have about 10 minutes.
It's not long enough.
But what an amazing turn within a horror filmmaker's career to turn the lens on himself and be like, okay, I made a bunch of horror films. What is it about horror films that works? What is it that doesn't work? And let's employ some pop culture commentary on the things that I've done, while at the same time making an effective horror movie. Scream still works.
I mean, it's 8.5.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
it
I
is.
mean, you know, it's
Yep.
that self-awareness turned into gold.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I remember that film hit like at the right time.
Perfect.
Perfect time.
It was like
Perfect
a
time.
pop phenomenon.
Yep.
Yep.
Because
And
we'd
for all
had-
those actors too, they got
We'd had
really
so
lucky.
many
Oh, yeah.
trashy 80s horror movies from like Sleepaway Camp.
And a lot of sequels and stuff too
Just-
in the 80s.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
If you were a filmmaker
There were
in the
several
80s,
nightmares, I
you
think.
probably
There were.
produced some horror sequel at some point for like $50,000 and it made 120 and you're like, great, success. Was it good? No, it was terrible and everybody hated making it.
Right.
But it made money. So
Well,
we're going to make another one.
The reason there could be so many Scream sequels too is because the idea of what a sequel becomes was built into the very fabric of the film.
Yeah.
Yes,
So that any
exactly.
sequel did not have to live up to such high
No,
expectations.
It just
was
had to
gonna
comment on
ride
the
what-
fact that it was a sequel.
Yep.
Scream 2
Right.
is all about what do you do in
And-
the sequel?
right.
What
Randy
happens
tells
the
you
second
what to
time?
do.
And who understands, you know, the nature of horror sequels better than Wes Craven?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just
He's the
brilliant.
he's the master of
Yep.
them. He orchestrated, and Kevin Williamson wrote great screenplays.
Yep.
I
love teaching Mrs. Tingle.
I love teaching Mrs. Tangle.
I'm
That
not
movie's
ashamed
so
of it.
fun. And that's the other thing too. Why I love Wes Craven is that it's scary, but like they're fun. I don't know. That sounds so gross
Some
to
people
say.
don't know how to make fun films.
But
I
it's
think
like
that's
fun.
what
Like
it is.
Scream is fun, and like we watch them all the time. I love all the
Scream
sequels.
2, 3, and 4.
I even love
Yeah.
the last
HBO
one.
right
I
now.
I'll
love
be
the last
honest.
one.
I don't care.
But
You
like
know. Yeah.
they're fun to play that like who done it game. Like even I've seen Scream maybe not 100 times. Oh, I've seen Scream a lot. But like I still have a fun time figuring out who did it, even though I know exactly who did it. And it just pays such homage to Craven's films, to Carpenter, to like it combines everything that you love. Exactly what you said. Like he's just like, let's see, what do we love about horror movies? Okay, and like just putting it all together, and you have this perfect final girl. You have just all these tropes that he works so well.
Yeah.
He works them so well because he is a master. He's a master at it.
Yeah.
He's great at it.
And then even with Scream 4, which, say what you will about it, I enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was a fun
It was
movie.
a blast.
It does what the Scream movies do best, where it says, why the hell are we making Scream 4? And then it looks to the camera kind of and is like, well, you're watching it, so let's go on this ride together.
Right.
And you play the same game. You see the boots and you're like, oh, those are black boots. The killer wears black boots. Is it that person? Or, oh, how could they be in the same room at the same time? And you're playing detective throughout this whole thing. And it's fun.
I mean, how fun is it in, what is it, Scream 2 with Mrs. Loomis?
Yeah.
Who, like, is,
great
Billy's
Laurie
mom from the
Metcalf.
first one, and it's like, oh my god, it's Friday the 13th, and it's so good. And you don't see it coming, and that's probably my favorite killer out of all of them, that you really don't see that one
No.
coming, and it's so fun. I love that one.
I have to loop back to Nightmare real quick.
Oh, yeah,
only
no.
because there's three moments that are three of the greatest moments in film history to me. In the bathtub, there's something safe about a bath.
Yes,
Taking a bath,
again.
it's warm,
You're
Yep.
safe, you're alone.
and Jaws, the shark fin came up as the glove
Yep.
and started moving towards her. I mean, it was
Yep.
just such a brilliant homage to Jaws.
And it's terrifying.
When the character, I forget if it's Johnny Depp or whatever character is sleeping, and Freddy comes
Yep.
through the wall.
Yep.
Like, it's just,
Yeah.
and then there's the scene where he's walking down the alley with the long arms.
Yep.
I mean, they're just so simple but so effective, and it's
And
just,
things that
I'll always remember
literally
them.
would haunt your nightmares.
Right.
You're right. He could do whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Anything was on the table because it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
have to rely on realistic
And then
moments.
even
It
as
could
a
be
viewer, if
anything.
you're like, well, that's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
scary to me,
So
the person sitting next to you is crapping their pants because
Right.
they're like, that's the most terrifying thing I could possibly
Yeah.
imagine.
And why not have him be living in a boiler room, which is terrifying.
Oh.
Like basements and boiler rooms and furnaces, they're so scary. And like,
Especially for kids.
yeah, and exactly that it's also the lack of control, which I think is a big thing in a lot of horror movies. With like Michael Myers, he keeps coming after you. In Nightmare, it's brilliant because you're sleeping and it's kind of hard sometimes to wake up, and like that's the thing, is that Freddy can keep you
Right.
there and do whatever he wants to you,
Yeah.
and you might not be aware that you're asleep. Like you can't, like it's this like creepy trap, like being lost in the woods or in the house.
Doesn't
or, like,
Inception owe a little bit to that?
Yeah,
You
it
know,
kinda
am I
should.
awake? I don't know if I'm awake.
Right.
It's
How many
just the
layers are in this
reality.
dream?
right,
Right,
is this
exactly.
real? Like, is he really going to stab me right now?
Right.
Am I going to
It's so
die, or is this a
terrifying.
dream?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Have-
you're just not safe anywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Have either of you, I know you haven't because wife, have either of you ever experienced or known anyone to experience sleep paralysis? This is a tangent, but it makes sense. It is horrifying.
There,
It's where you wake up,
Yeah.
but your body is still
yeah.
asleep and you
Right.
cannot move. And you can't breathe either, which is the scariest thing.
Yeah.
It happened to me a few times where you just wake up, like your eyes are open, but you feel a weight on your chest and you just feel like an elephant is stepping on you or something, and you cannot move. And I feel like that's part of why Freddy Krueger works so
There's a
well.
documentary on it.
Yeah.
About the Slender Man, right? Isn't it the Slender Man?
Weird. See,
That they
Some,
call
yeah.
it? Something like that.
someone was just telling me about Slender Man last night, and I didn't know anything about it.
It's like that. It's like, but like people have said that they see like this figure over them.
And I have.
That's creepy.
It's terrifying.
I haven't had the breathing thing, but I definitely had the thing where you wake up and you can't move, and it feels like you're sunken into
Yep.
the bed.
Yeah, yeah.
and
You're just
like,
sinking.
You're just
And
completely.
you're doing everything you can to just like move a finger
Yeah.
to hit your wife to be like, please save me. Please, I can't. And then it just goes away. And that's the worst part because then you feel stupid. You're like, did that even happen?
Right.
Or the bed eats you.
Or the bed eats you.
I love that scene where the bed eats him and then shoots him off.
Yes.
So good.
There's some great directors that directed the Nightmare on Elm Streets.
Yeah, there are actually. Yeah.
Rennie Harlan and Charles Russell, and I think
Yep.
Frank Darabont wrote
Yeah, Frank
two of them.
Darabont.
Wow. Talk about someone who
Yeah.
directs unorthodox horror movies
Yes.
very well. I mean,
does.
Shawshank Redemption is yeah, that's the thing. Great.
Yeah.
It's great about Stephen King's work outside of the blatantly horror genre is they're still horror films.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
Stand by Me. I mean, they
God. Yeah.
they're very human horror films.
But they're so hard.
Yeah.
I liked The Mist.
I love.
I
I
thought
love
that
the
was a
story.
really solid.
Well, and Frank Darabont fought for that ending.
Yeah.
They didn't want the studio
I
did
love
not
the
want
ending.
that ending.
It's horrible. It's so horrible.
It
It's
is.
oh my
The
god.
only shortcoming of that film and I'm not confusing it with The Fog, right? The
The
Fog
Mist
is
has
the
like
pirates.
the dinosaurs.
Yes.
That's Stephen King.
The only fault with that is that we see too much of the creatures when we're in the grocery store. That should have been so much more atmospheric.
Yeah, in the short story, you don't really. You just like he kind of describes.
People are just taking
them, and they're taken. And he kind of describes them, so you can get sort of a picture of what they look like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'd watch that movie again. I saw it in the theater because it's one of my favorite Stephen King stories, and I just didn't like it. But I'd have to see
Thomas
it again.
Jane is fantastic.
He's awesome in it.
in that movie.
But that ending though, that ending stays with you, man.
It's genius.
Oh
It's the type
god.
of ending that makes you like, even if like if you're watching the movie and you're like, this is okay, like I wouldn't call this a masterpiece or anything,
Right.
but then you get to that ending and you're like, wow, that makes me
Oh,
want to rethink the whole
It
movie.
literally,
Yeah,
it
you
literally
rethink the whole
adds a
movie.
half star to your rating in your mind.
Right.
Like it's just like, yep, that's incredible.
So heartbreaking. Yeah.
Before we go, we have to talk about Friday the 13th at least.
Oh yeah.
Because
We've referenced it a couple times.
we've
but-
referenced it, and we then, he becomes his own subgenre.
Oh, he's
of horror.
iconic. I mean,
We get
Yep.
all of the Friday the 13th movies, which establishes even more rules of don't have sex, you don't go into the woods by yourself,
do
all this other
drugs.
stuff, don't do drugs, don't drink. Like, it establishes, like, the chaste final girl purity of all of that. And then it turns into, Jason in space. Jason takes Manhattan.
Freddy versus Jason.
Freddy
I
versus
love Freddy
Jason.
versus Jason.
Which actually,
That movie's so stupid.
there was talk of a movie, but they only got around to a graphic novel of Freddy versus Jason versus Ash.
Oh, I thought there was Predator
Whoa.
too. Wasn't there
Well,
Predator?
there was
one?
Alien versus Predator.
Alien versus
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
But Freddy versus Jason versus Ash is great because it's from Ash's perspective. So like you have the Evil Dead world, which we didn't even get into Evil Dead.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, somehow he gets mixed into Freddy and Jason fighting each other, and then he's the audience proxy and he's our true hero. So do we root for one of these monsters, or do we root for the good guy? And he's got the chainsaw, and Freddy's got the glove, and he's got the machete, and it's there. There's one panel that just sticks in my head of Jason kills somebody with a clipboard by shoving it through their mouth.
Jeez.
So their body drops down and the top of their head is just sitting on top of the clipboard, which is gross. But you read it and you go, oh man, that's awesome. And that's what those movies turned into.
I have to go back to the original Friday the 13th because I just feel like, as much as I did love a lot of the sequels. There's something about it that's just not as well crafted as like a Nightmare on Elm Street or a Night of the Living Dead or a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But maybe I need to watch it again. I don't know.
Who did the original Friday the 13th?
not
Was it
sure.
Sean Cunningham?
Sean Cunningham.
Yeah, it's the structure of it is, it's such a simple movie. It is a weird feeling that it's the mom that's like unexpected.
Right, true.
But yeah, I would give it a go. I love Friday the 13th because it's another fun slasher. You have, I think the main girl's name is Alice. Alice, who has some of the final girl qualities. She's the good girl of the group, and like it's a low body count. It's not like super graphic or violent. Same thing along the lines of Halloween, and same sort of thing is that like it's kids hanging out, and having fun, and then this thing keeps happening, and it's like a fun little journey you go on with Alice, like her finding all of her friends, her trying to figure out how to defeat him, what to do, and then having like the mom there, and then like it's also one. I like it because it does have a great backstory.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I mean, Michael Myers has a decent one too, but I like the backstory of Jason, and I think the sequels, a lot of them lose that backstory. But
It just
yeah,
fits
I
into body
think
count
the
at
original's
that
very
point.
simple, and it's a lot of fun.
I never thought how, until you just said that, how about, I always knew it was the mom, but it's like, that's an homage to Psycho.
Exactly.
It's a mother killing for her son.
Yep.
In Psycho, it's clearly him dressed up as his mother,
Right,
but still
right.
he thinks his mother's killing for him.
Yep.
And it's real, I never thought about
You just
that.
take it
It's
to the next level.
there.
Yeah,
It's
you take it to the next level and actually have
Right.
it
Be the mother.
Be the
right.
mother.
What if we told this story
Scream too.
through
Right.
this device?
It's
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it works out
Wow.
so well.
And then they do like they still have a lot of horror tropes too. They use them to their advantage in making this slasher movie that is very much a slasher movie. It has all the rules. It's like this mom is mad because the camp counselors were, having sex and her little boy drowned. So like now she has these kids
that could easily happen.
partying. It could easily happen.
That's the thing.
Again, it's another human story that could very easily
And as
happen.
a parent, that's a nightmare of yours.
Right.
I send my kid away to camp.
Now that's interesting.
The
looking
teenage kids aren't paying attention, and my kid dies.
Yeah.
Then what?
Right.
Then you lose your mind and you go and you kill those kids.
Right. It's almost like Grendel, which is like the flip of Beowulf, where it's from the perspective of the monster. It's almost like what you just said is like if you put yourself in like her shoes.
Right.
It's like, well, not justifying the actions. It's still like interesting. It's like, oh, what would that be like? Like looking at it from her perspective. It's like I feel compelled to. No one's gonna, do anything about this.
Exactly.
So.
And Jason's another one that doesn't run. Mm-hmm. And he's just big, scary, and keeps coming. And another one that, in the same vein as Carpenter is that, he's, in the background. You see him, walk by the window, or you see a shadow of him, or, he kind of comes out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's the same sort of thing that you learn
there's
to watch.
a musical cue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those three understood that the monster should be slow and determined.
Yeah.
Romero with his zombies being lumbering and coming at you. And then they turn into rage monsters and other zombie movies, and it's just not quite as effective.
It's not as scary because it's that slow and steady that they aren't. I don't know. They're not, because they're not aggressive. They're scarier to me. Zombies, Romero zombies, are perfect because they are what I think of when I think of zombies.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's probably obviously because of him, but that slow moving,
Right.
that no thought. Just I have to go and I'm going after this person and I'm just going to keep going until I get this person. And
you have to stop me. I won't stop.
Right, exactly.
I still think what Danny Boyle did with it still worked with the faster
Yeah,
zombies, and it definitely kind of paved the way
effective.
for a whole new genre. But it's
It was weird because when I remember my friends and I in college going to see 28 Days Later, and then one of them who was a purist George A. Romero fan was watching it and was just I can't believe how much he is stealing, just outright stealing from George A. Romero.
Yeah.
And then there was an article that came out with Danny Boyle, and he was saying George A. Romero, he doesn't those films aren't even good. I'm making the real, and it's what are you doing, dude? And then when Dawn of the Dead came out, the remake, he was the one that came in there and was yeah, let's see how this movie's gonna be. And all of us walking out of the theater being that wasn't stupid, that was good.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting. There's I heard that when Tarkovsky made Solaris, he wanted to make an anti-2001: A Space Odyssey because Kubrick bored him to tears. And it's does that make 2001 a horrible film? Of course not. But is Tarkovsky a genius? Yes. So that's why it's it's really interesting when it's someone's opinion. And Danny Boyle is a good filmmaker, but to try to make a commentary on such an iconic film, it's maybe there's something you're not getting, or maybe it's not aligning with your taste. But to just outright say it's not good is kind of doing a disservice.
And you know that what you're watching is good if it elicits that much of a response. That as a creative person, you're I need to respond to this with my art.
Right.
And right or wrong, 28 Days Later is a solid movie.
Yeah, it's great.
But is it a zombie movie or is it a rage-infected thing? It creates its own subgenre there as well.
Yeah, it's a little different. Yeah.
Well, we should wrap up.
Oh,
I know we could be here all friggin' day.
it's always happens.
Clear your schedule. We're just going to talk for 3 hours.
The 8-hour episode is coming.
Let's have final words though, and just go around and just
Absolutely.
say what our favorites are.
Yeah, Devon, why don't you take us away with top 3 horror films?
Ooh.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street, and the third one's tough. It would probably be a tie between a bunch of them, to be honest. Those two though are just the ones that will always be lasting for me.
Yeah.
Halloween. It's probably my favorite. Scream. I love Scream so much, guys.
Scream got me into horror movies for the most part. Got me
I
to
don't
like
know.
them.
Yeah, I'm the same with the third. That I love so many of the movies that we talked about. I also love I love The Shining. I also love House on Haunted Hill. I also love
The Hills Have Eyes.
We didn't talk about that.
like haunted house movies. I love The Conjuring. Like even like a recent one. Conjuring is real
Insidious. I'm sorry, I just have to.
good. Insidious is good.
I'll say that's my favorite like modern horror movie.
Yeah, I
Maybe,
think
anyway.
yeah. But Halloween and Scream are like, and probably probably Nightmare or Friday the 13th are like in there, and I just love those movies. I think they're great.
I love the slow building horror movie. So number one for me is Rosemary's Baby, because again, it's just an actual horrific thing, and just the way it's directed is just
it's a beautiful build. Yeah.
The Shining.
Yeah.
Can't get around that. And then The Thing, just because I think it's a masterpiece. And even with it being a monster movie where you get your money's worth and you see all the horrific things that you want to see, there is a slow burning, horrible 70s thriller underneath it all, and it's great.
I'm all over the place. Halloween for sure. The Shining for sure. But also The Thing. But also The Conjuring. But also Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead, I just rearranged my top 4 on Letterboxd, and it's now in my top 4 because we watched it again, and I realized I've seen this movie so many times, and I love it so much, and I look at every single shot, and I'm dissecting everything that Edgar Wright is doing, and I see every little homage that he's thrown in there. Some of them subtle, some of them more obvious, and it's just like, this is everything that I want. Plus, it has quirky British humor, which I adore. So yeah, those are my faves.
So I'm finally going to do Filmstruck, because I was looking at it and I was
telling
like,
you.
how the hell am I not having this?
Might as well call it David Metzger's Film Club.
We're going to start talking about it more in the show, so that free subscription.
Free subscription.
But the Filmstruck plus the Criterion, and,
Yes.
and
Oh, man.
not even getting into like just black and white horror films, because those are the ones that are just like so great to cuddle on the couch with. But
I love House
I
on
mean,
Haunted Hill.
this
I love
week
that movie.
is just Mario Bava films.
Oh,
I mean, that's the
dude.
thing. Is like every week it's different, so you feel like you're at a restaurant and they put a different menu in front of you, and you're like, I get to watch
so
all these.
subscribing.
Oh,
I mean,
That's
it's
so
it's
fun.
amazing. Yeah.
And now that would work perfectly with your schedule too.
Right.
Speaking of things to plug that are not of our creation, they're doing a very short special season on the podcast, You Must Remember This, about Universal monster movies, Bela Lugosi, and you made me forget the other guy's name.
Sorry.
Bela
Boris
Lugosi
Karloff?
and Boris Karloff, and like their 2 career paths and how they were parallel, but
Just
how
think
they,
Ed Wood.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I highly recommend that. It was a really, really fun episode, and it's only going to be a handful for Halloween.
You know, Karloff, I just watched this old film with him on Filmstruck called Bedlam, and I wasn't used to hearing him talk, really. I knew him, as Frankenstein and very man of few words, and it's like his voice was as chilling as Vincent Price. I mean, it really was. It had this whole character to it that was haunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for being on this.
This was so much fun.
The second Joey mentioned that he was going to do special programming for Halloween, we should we should do a Halloween special. And then I got to go crazy and do all this stuff too. So thank you both. Any
you.
plugs? Where people can find you if you want to be found?
Devon and I are on an improv team, and we perform every Wednesday at the Vermont Comedy Club. It's $5. It is regular improv and then musical improv.
That's right.
Slinky Says Relax. That is where you can find both of us. We'll be there.
Cool. Devon, you also have a radio show.
Every Tuesday from 6 to 8, you can listen to 105.9 FM, The Radiator, and my show is called The Panoramic View, or you can stream it on BigHeavyWorld.com.
And you can obviously find us every Wednesday 8 on VCAM Channel 15. Find us on Facebook, Instagram.
I just want to say just a special thing that I haven't talked about yet, but my new film Northland, starring these 2 guys, is going to be released November 17th in conjunction with Birthday. So, yay.
How about
This is
that?
when we're just hearing this too.
Exclusive. Super
Yay!
exciting. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween!
Can't
Happy
wait.
Halloween.
Can't wait for a Christmas special. Bye, guys.
I'm telling you, kids up here doing the snow.
Christmas time
my
is
God.
here.